the C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group, which is a group of now 80 large cities. We're finding that cities are part of the problem. A largely urban future by 2050 can mean a good quality of life for billions of people if done correctly. 1.5 tons of carbon per person by 2050 is a realistic but challenging goal. And it's a goal that, if we are going to be able to meet it, cities will lead the way. Realizing that a sustainable, equitable future by 2050 requires action by 2020. Paris won't give us what we need, so non-state actors, cities, must step up. And C40 mayors are committed to providing a future that accommodates rapid urbanization, yet provides improved quality of living. This is achievable by having targets and through concrete, measurable, replicable actions. C40 Cities is an organization, it is a funny name because we have 80 cities now. And these 80 cities around the world are some of the world's largest, most influential cities. They make up roughly 650 million people and 25% of the global GDP. What this network of cities does is we bring together those committed mayors who are very passionate about climate change issues to accelerate action and reduce transaction costs. So the history of C40, we are in our 10th year. It was started on the belief that mayors know how to get the job done. That's why C40 is mayoral-led, with support from preeminent experts and partnerships with organizations like green building councils around the world. It was founded by mayors for mayors, and has flourished under the direction of its chairs, including Ken Livingston from London, David Miller from Toronto, Michael Bloomberg from New York City, and Eduardo País from Rio de Janeiro. The organization is organized into 16 networks, organized under thematic areas. And I'll just point out that while we focus on a number of themes, that the city of Buenos Aires is leading our BRT, Bus Rapid Transit Network, and sharing the best practices that have been developed and implemented in Buenos Aires with the rest of the world. So, the context of why I am here. More than 50% of citizens now live in cities, a pace that's accelerating. In particular, there are some areas that are expecting particularly high rates of urbanization. China is predicting 300 to 400 million people urbanizing. And I believe that Argentina has around 40 million people, so that's 10 times the full population of Argentina moving into urban cities in China over the next 20 years. So cities are a major source of carbon emissions, but they also represent an amazing opportunity to take action on both a straight environmental perspective, but also from an economic opportunity as well. So in our own research, the Climate Action in Megacities report that we do every 2 years, cities report that integrated planning is one of the key factors in making communities healthier, more sustainable, and more successful. And what we are finding, because I'm talking to a room full of business people that are delivering action, is that the good news is we are able to see that the business case is possible, and that reducing carbon emissions is possible at the same time as growing economic growth. And so this slide from LSE is a slide showing the reduced carbon emissions from Portland, Oregon. So strong growth value has been added along with per capita growth and steady increase in jobs. And that's been matched with a consistent reduction in greenhouse gas emissions per capita. And this has partly been driven by a reduction in energy building use, building energy use. So this slide is just designed to show you that the number of climate actions has doubled since 2011 to 2013 in cities. And in particular, you'll see that the greatest gains are in the middle of the graph in adaptation, water, and community scale development. From amongst the 65 cities that reported here, C40 found that there were 1,040 actions related to community scale development. with 45 cities taking a number of actions, around 200 actions on transit-oriented development. So really just, this slide is to show you that cities are recognizing the importance and opportunity and are taking actions in this space. And what I want to really talk about today is to give what to some of you might seem like is a simple message, but when implemented is particularly effective, that the opportunities and the elements of a successful low-carbon city is that it's compact, connected, and coordinated. So let's just talk a little bit about compact. Sprawl is the enemy. I'll start with an example, a particularly delicate example from the United States. Houston, Texas, is one of the largest, most sprawling, car-dependent cities in the United States. It's the largest U.S. city to lack zoning codes that manage private development. By 2035, if the present trend continues, Houstonians will be spending 145% more time commuting than they currently do in their cars. So Houston has a number of programs because they don't have building codes. They have a number of programs that are designed to overcome this legacy of sprawl. They're offering developers up to $15,000 per unit for developing multi-unit housing near the city's core. They launched a light rail system in 2004, and they added three new lines, and they're currently planning on implementing a BRT system. Strong leadership is required to make these investments and reforms because it's a catch-22 situation. They want density, so they need to remove the reliance on the car. But without the density, there's no support for light rail. Therefore, there needs to be strong political support for this light rail investment. Another example, a bit more local, is from Curitiba, Brazil. In the 1970s, they made policies that were designed to use an integrated planning solution to reduce sprawl in the city. The city invested in transit-oriented development based around a BRT system, which covers 90% of the city and accounts for 45% of daily usage. Now, Curitiba's BRT system is one that we point to and has been replicated around the world. Another example, coming back to the United States, is Portland, Oregon, that created an urban boundary that is helping to design and guide growth. So enacted in 1973, the city set limits on the size of the city with the aim of ensuring development so that it creates a high-quality housing close to jobs, and farm and rural land is protected outside of the city. So to put it in more stark business terms, sprawl costs the United States over $400 billion per year. There are opportunities to save over $200 billion per year in the United States alone. In Houston, transportation costs around 14% of annual GDP, whereas Copenhagen, it's only 4%. So the opportunities of more dense development are strong in a purely economic term. So let me just show you a slide that you might have seen before, but I think is a great visual representation of the difference between two cities that are roughly the same population, but have dramatically different transportation connectivity. So Barcelona is double the rapid transit opportunity and 1/26th the area of Atlanta. Atlanta has 10 times the amount of carbon emissions per capita. Now the cost, if they were to increase the amount of transportation coverage, would be $15 million per kilometer multiplied by 39,000 kilometers. So there are somewhat prohibitive costs to implement that type of transportation coverage. But if there had been smarter, higher density at the beginning, it would be a lot better to begin with. So connectivity, and I show a picture here of a road that I'm sure you're all familiar with. A quote from our friend Enrique Peñalosa from Bogota is that a successful city is not one where the poor drive cars, but where the rich take buses. The basis for success is spatial planning. It's an obvious statement now, but studies have argued that avoiding sprawl will be the single most important factor in creating environmentally sustainable cities. So ease of mobility is the bedrock of a successful city. And there's the 5-minute rule. You need to be able to access transportation within 5 minutes. And we have seen in Buenos Aires and in Lagos 20 to 50% reductions in time and cost gains from the implementation of BRT. And we've seen globally that public transit users, along with pedestrians and bikers, spend more money when they're shopping. And there are also significant social gains to be made in a city from a city that's based on public transportation rather than private vehicles. But of course, planning and transportation policy are not the only drivers for sustainable cities. Buildings shape the skylines of our megacities. As these cities step up to the challenge of climate change, it is often the buildings that they turn to first. Almost half of C40's city emissions come from the energy consumed in buildings. So it's a natural starting point. Buildings are a classic example about how mayors use their powers for good. Around 2/3 of cities' building emissions come from private buildings, so it's a critical sector. You'll see that mayoral powers over private buildings are of course not as strong as their powers over municipal buildings. They don't generally control the budget. However, they do have quite sizable powers over the policies and regulations which influence buildings. So C40's created a network, as I showed on that earlier slide, committed to private building efficiency. And I'd like to share, over the next slide, 3 examples with you. So the first example, and this is just showing where emissions come from here. You'll see that Latin America's building emissions are slightly lower than Europe, which has higher heating demand. But it's a little chilly today here, but in Latin America it's around 27% of building emissions. So the 3 examples that I want to show, I'll start with Tokyo. Tokyo has a strong vision for promoting a shift to greener, lower carbon building. It's a city with quite significant powers. And it launched its carbon emissions trading scheme in 2010 and has seen quite impressive results from the very beginning. It started with 1,400 buildings, and these targeted buildings submit an annual report on their emissions saving. There's a strong, consistent theme that you will hear me talk about over the next few slides about you need to be able to measure so that you can manage. And as an organization led by Mayor Bloomberg, who has built a business around data, the notion of measuring and being transparent with data is one of the clear components that you need to take to be able to manage emissions. So in Tokyo, they've highlighted 2 elements of their success. They had mandatory reporting in place for several years that provided accurate data for setting targets, and they conducted extensive consultation with various stakeholders in designing this process. So there are 2 compliance periods. The first from 2010 to 2014, which required an 8% reduction, and the second from 2015 to 2019. The early initial results were a 13% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2010, and 22% in fiscal year 2011 and 2012. So the results have been exceeded in the first compliance period already. Another example that I highlight is New York City's Greater Greener Building Plan. This climate change issue is considered a market failure by New York, and regulations can be seen as a significant tool, even for market-minded players. The Greener Greater Building Plan is a comprehensive mandatory policy consisting of 4 regulatory laws. It requires benchmarking. So buildings are now required to publish benchmark energy and water consumption data on an annual basis. New York City's Energy Conservation Code is a new local energy code requiring renovations that impact energy systems to meet new energy conservation standards. And the Energy Audit and Retro Commissioning. So building owners are required to do retro commissioning every 10 years. And there's a lighting and sub-metering requirement by the year 2025, non-residential lighting must be upgraded to meet energy code, and large commercial tenants are provided with sub-metering. So the costs of this, as I know you're all thinking bottom line, the costs of this are a net savings of $7 billion per year. So an upfront cost of $5 billion with an annual savings of $12 billion. And the final example that I just point out is from Melbourne, Australia. Their 1,200 building program, which aimed to overcome a major challenge around the split incentive. So it's designed to overcome the barrier, working in partnership with the financial sector to incentivize building owners in the state to establish the first local government legislation for existing commercial buildings. It's establishing financial mechanisms around energy, environmental upgrade financing, giving commercial building owners better access to financing and allowing the costs to be split. The next key issue here is coordination. That you're all sitting here motivated by this idea of sharing information. And the opportunity is really around integrated planning. So the objective is to share resources on strategies and processes so that you can help develop neighborhood and master plans which integrate city sustainability plans and goals into redevelopment opportunities that help deliver the results for cities. So we're working very closely with cities to help share best practices through integrated planning and implementing them, advancing master plans. So I picture here an image from Johannesburg's Corridors of Freedom, which is designed to right the challenges of apartheid. And it's actively engaging stakeholders to address the inequitable fabric of the Johannesburg city. So we're really working on supporting, developing incentives and sharing resources on making the business case, which is one of the key areas that we're engaged with. So I wanted to share a local example that I think is a prime example of integrated planning. The Healthy Mobility Project is one that we talk about, and it's one that I assume that you're quite familiar with. It was implemented to tackle the problems linked to the increasing number of vehicles in the city, as traffic congestion, high stress levels, sedentary and negative externalities on the environment. So the project aims at recovering the social function of urban spaces and conceived as meeting spaces and emphasizes the examples from Jan Hill's books. So Healthy Mobility in Buenos Aires has two main goals: promoting bicycles and promoting walkability. And I was quite excited to, having spoken about this project quite a bit globally, to actually see it in practice. So congratulations to the city and to everybody that helped play a role in that. The next area is one that I think is a challenge that I'm going to impart upon all of you. It's really setting ambitious goals. And the private sector has a great opportunity here to help show the way forward. C40 established, in partnership with the U.S. Green Building Council, an effort that creates a new framework to design to reinvent large-scale urban development that is environmentally sustainable and economically viable. This is, again, focusing on the business case, but delivering true, tangible results at a scale level. And we came up with a framework that looks to detail the journey that developments of scale take to achieve a net carbon negative goal. And the framework looks at three operational emissions categories. Oh, people are having trouble hearing me. I hope that it's just the translation and not the content. C40's climate positive development framework looks at encouraging developers to reduce energy emissions, to reduce transportation emissions, and to reduce waste emissions. And then expand the impact into the surrounding community by generating credits that expand the impact into the surrounding community. So these developments will truly be driving tangible change and reductions in global greenhouse gas emissions. We have 17 projects around the world that are emphasizing that this framework is possible everywhere. This is not just a Scandinavian solution, but it's truly a globally relevant opportunity that's setting a global benchmark. So the first project that I wanted to highlight is the Barangaroo project in Sydney, Australia. This is the largest regeneration project in Australia. It's 22 hectares being developed in 3 phases. It's around $6 billion worth of development. being done by the Lend-Lease development company. And they completed a climate positive roadmap detailing the strategies and tactics that they will pursue, and identifying those strategies that they will pursue. So I just wanted to highlight their energy strategy, that they're going to be energy efficient and have embedded climate change adaptation and design. So this is very much about performance. This is not just about planning, this is about performance and delivering results. They've got on-site renewable and low-carbon energy strategies. They're making investments in off-site renewable energy generation. As part of the transportation, this compact connected transportation is a very important issue. As you can see in the project, it's right in the heart of the city. So this project this is all new. This is the computer-generated designs. This doesn't exist right now. If you've been to Sydney, you'll recognize the Opera House over there. So this is a new site that is transforming old industrial area into particularly low-carbon site. So they've got a zero-waste goal, sustainable consumption, waste minimization as a strategy, centralized waste storage to maximize the economies of scale, and they're extending recycling to the surrounding neighborhood. Water, which is a particularly big issue in Australia, is being recycled for wastewater treatment so that it will actually be water positive. And to engage the community, because as we've said that these issues, you can design the most energy efficient building, but if it's not utilized as designed, it is not going to actually be as efficient in practice. They've implemented an eco-concierge model. So there's education, there's strong education, stakeholder engagement. The next project I wanted to show is another Lend-Lease project, in fact. It's in central London. I don't know, the London Eye is right here. So this is very much a central development site called the Elephant and Castle. It's 1 kilometer from the River Thames and City Hall. It's in the top 10% of the most economically deprived areas in England. Nearly 50% of the homes in this area are social housing. And this, as with many of the particularly successful sites that we are seeing, is a mixed tenured neighborhood. So it's got housing, it's got economic activity, it has a vibrant life day and night. So it's going to be a site of around 2,500 homes. It's a mix of homes, shops, businesses, social infrastructure. There's jobs and training built in. And I'm really just showing this to really emphasize that this is not just particularly gilded development, that it's development that has both a social as well as a higher end development. So high quality architecture is being implemented. You can see the green roofs that are everywhere. There's water capture. They've developed the largest park in London. So the preservation of open space is always an important component. Another site that I wanted to highlight is another European site, the Stockholm Royal Seaport. So this is a functioning port. Again, computer-generated images because the site doesn't fully exist yet. But what we're seeing here is a roughly 240 hectare regeneration. It will be fossil fuel free by 2050 and emit 2 tons of CO2 per capita by 2030. So the difference here between many of our other sites is that this is being developed by the city. The city owns the land, they're doing the development. By project completion, there will be 12,000 residents and 35,000 workers on site on a daily basis. Particularly innovative here is that this is a smart grid solution. So it's using ICT to make life easier and more efficient for the residents, but also using technology to continually improve. So this emphasis on ICT is drawing businesses. Ericsson and a number of other high-tech Swedish firms are setting up site here to really help drive economic investment. And the final site that I wanted to talk about is one of the biggest projects that we're working with that have committed to this climate positive goal, this net carbon negative aspiration, is the Mahindra World City, Jaipur. So in Jaipur, India, it's a 3,000 acre site that will be home to 300,000 people, home and work to 300,000 people. In a business as usual case, it would have been emitting 800,000 tons of CO2 per day. per year. With the implementation of low carbon strategies and reduction efforts, it will actually be a net reduction of 60,000 tons of CO2 per year. Energy accounts for 80% of the site's total emissions, but through the implementation of low carbon energy strategies, there will be the opportunity to reduce 80% of these emissions. And then through the implementation of rooftop solar, an additional 30% reduction. In transportation, they use a strategy around avoid, shift, and improve, and they're implementing a new rail line to bring the workers, the 150,000 workers that we work there on a daily basis. So the big question that we ask, the rhetorical question, is can cities really make a difference? I've highlighted the opportunities with the private sector because cities cannot do it alone. But cities can play a major role in closing the 2020 emission gap. So to ensure that global warming remains below 2 degrees, annual global emissions must not be higher than 44 gigatons of CO2 per year. Under business as usual, emissions are going to reach 56 gigatons of CO2 per year by 2020. Therefore, a savings of 12% is required. 230 cities have already committed to savings of around a half a gigaton per year by 2020, which is only 4% of the required total. Cities have the potential, both through making new commitments and extending existing ones, to provide an additional 3 gigatons per year by 2020. This is a further 26% reduction of the target. So therefore, cities are able to contribute 30%, nearly a third of the total greenhouse gas emissions required by 2020. Now that's not going to get us there totally. But the most successful cities are the ones that are the most collaborative. So there's an African proverb that I really like that talks about if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that's particularly relevant to all of us in this room. So this is not just a city. So this is not just a city situation, but very much an opportunity for building councils around the world, as well as developers to share information. So to achieve the societal change that is required, because this is truly a global issue, carbon emissions don't know political boundaries. So to avoid runaway climate change is hard. It's going to be a difficult job. But the job becomes much easier when we work together. So C40 as an organization, a mayoral organization, is leveraging city engagement and city climate solutions to exchange information and knowledge between member cities. I'm really excited to hear about Buenos Aires' school effort, because I think that is an effort that other cities will be particularly interested in. I've talked a few times about BRT. The BRT that we're seeing in Buenos Aires is an idea that started in Curitiba and is now being implemented in New York City and London and cities around the world. So that ideas flow north and south and east and west. The example that we've seen in the private building energy efficiency around Melbourne's efforts to reduce carbon emissions and to address the split incentive is an opportunity that we can and are seeing being rolled out globally. But it's also an opportunity that we think building councils and private developers can implement as well. So the theory of change that we use is that the best source of information is another peer, in many cases cities, but in your case building councils, that have experience on this topic. And so through networks, facilitating great peer-to-peer learning and sharing of information, I speak with city officials all of the time sharing great examples. So I'm very keen to hear the rest of the discussion in today and tomorrow's presentations to take ideas and share them. Because good ideas truly have no owner, and we like to see them implemented and scaled. So this quote from Mayor Pais, the worst thing is not having the information, to not have the tools to act. But through information sharing, we do have those tools. And there's the ability to help reach our shared vision for the future. So, with that, I thank you. I say that there is true urgency because urban growth shows no sign of slowing down. The global urban population is 9 times larger than it was over 100 years ago. And my challenge to you is to be bold, to be ambitious, to share your successes, but also to share your challenges. Because the way that we can overcome challenges is being open about them, to replicate successes far and wide, and to avoid your pitfalls. So, thank you for the hosts for inviting me here. This is a thrill to be in Buenos Aires, and I look forward to having questions. I think there's a little bit of time for some questions, and I apologize that this was all in English, but I will put on headphones so that you can speak to me in Spanish.